What if everything you were taught about success is backwards? What if the thing you have been chasing your whole life was never meant to be chased at all? You have been told to go after success, to hunt it down, to work harder, to hustle more, to grind until your hands bleed and your eyes are heavy, and still, for so many people, it stays just out of reach, always one more year away, always one more sacrifice away, always one more Monday away. And I want to tell you something today that might unsettle you a little, and I hope it does, because the things that change our lives are rarely the things that make us comfortable. Success is not something you chase. Success is something you attract. And you attract it not by becoming a better hunter, but by becoming a better person. Stay with me, because by the end of the next hour, you will never look at your work, your income, or your future the same way again. Let me start with a simple truth that took me years to understand. And once you understand it, you cannot unsee it. Working hard on your job will earn you a living. Working hard on yourself will earn you a fortune. Read that again. Working hard on your job will earn you a living. Working hard on yourself will earn you a fortune. Most people spend their entire lives investing in their job, in their paycheck, in their position, in their title. And they invest almost nothing in the one asset that determines the ceiling of everything else they will ever achieve. And that asset is themselves. You can work at the same job for 20 years and still be worth the same amount you were worth on job, day one, because you were paid for your time, not for your growth. But the moment you begin working on yourself, something remarkable happens. You do not just increase your income, you increase your capacity. And capacity is the mother of every opportunity that will ever find you. Here is a question I want you to sit with. Have you ever noticed that some people can lose everything, and I mean everything? Their business, their money, their reputation, their home, and yet within a few short years they are back, sometimes even stronger than before? And have you noticed that other people can be handed everything, an inheritance, a head start, a golden opportunity, and yet within a few short years they have nothing left to show for it? Why does that happen? It happens because success was never in the money to begin with. Success was in the person. You can take away a person's money, but if you cannot take away who they have become, they will build it all back, because the ability to create value lives inside them, not inside their bank account. That is why working on yourself is not a luxury. It is the entire game. Now let's talk about attraction, because this is the philosophy that changes everything once it settles into your bones. Attraction is not about manipulation, and it is not about luck. Attraction is about becoming the kind of person that good things, good opportunities, and good people naturally gravitate toward. Think about it this way. Bees do not chase flowers. Flowers become so rich in nectar, so vivid in color, so irresistible in fragrance, that the bees cannot help but come to them. That is attraction. That is the model for your life. Stop chasing the bees. Become the flower. When you become more valuable, more skilled, more disciplined, more wise, more capable of solving real problems for real people, you do not have to chase clients, chase promotions, or chase opportunities anymore. They begin to chase you. This is not wishful thinking. This is cause and effect, as certain as gravity, as certain as the seasons. So the real question becomes, how do you become attractive in this sense? Not attractive in appearance, though take care of that too, but attractive in value. And the answer that unlocks everything else, is this. You must be willing to work harder on yourself than you work on anything else in your life. Harder than you work on your job. Harder than you work on your excuses. Harder than you work on your comfort. Personal development is not a seminar you attend once a year. It is not a book you read and set on a shelf. It is a daily discipline, a quiet and consistent devotion to becoming a little bit wiser, a little bit stronger, a little bit more disciplined, a little bit more valuable than you were yesterday. And here is the beautiful part. These small daily deposits do not add up. They compound. They multiply. What starts as a 1% improvement becomes, over months and years, an entirely different person living an entirely different life. Let me ask you something else. What is the difference between a person earning $30,000 a year and a person earning $300,000 a year? Is it that one person works 10 times harder with their hands? Rarely. Is it that one person works 10 times longer hours? Almost never. The real difference, 9 times out of 10, is that one person has made themselves worth 10 times more. Not worth more in arrogance, not worth more in ego, but worth more in actual, tangible, valuable skill. They can solve bigger problems. They can lead more people. They can make better decisions under pressure. They can communicate more persuasively. They can think more clearly when everyone else panics. That is value. And value, once developed, cannot be taken from you by a recession, a layoff, or a bad year. It travels with you into every room you ever walk into for the rest of your life. This brings me to one of the most liberating ideas I can offer you today. You do not need permission to grow. Nobody is holding you back from reading one more book this month. Nobody is stopping you from listening to something that sharpens your mind instead of something that numbs it. Nobody is preventing you from waking up 30 minutes earlier to plan your day with intention, instead of drifting through it in reaction. The opportunity to develop yourself is the most democratic opportunity on earth. It does not care about your background, your accent, your neighborhood, or your bank balance. It is available to the janitor and the CEO in exactly the same measure. The only variable is whether you will seize it. I want you to imagine two people starting the exact same job on the exact same day, at the exact same pay, with the exact same opportunities in front of them. Person one decides, this is fine, this is enough, I will do what is required and go home. Person two decides, I will do what is required, and then I will spend an hour a night becoming someone more capable than the job even demands. Give that gap 5 years. Just 5 years. Person one is doing the same job, perhaps slightly better through repetition, but fundamentally unchanged. Person two is now unrecognizable, promoted, respected, sought after, perhaps running their own venture, perhaps leading the very team they once belonged to. Same starting line, same clock, wildly different destination. What made the difference was never the job. It was what each person did with the version of themselves outside of the job. Now, some of you listening to this are thinking, that sounds good, but I do not have time. And I want to challenge that thought directly, because it is the single most common lie personal development has to overcome. You have time. What you may not have is a plan for that time, or a burning enough reason to protect that time. Here is the truth about time. It passes at the exact same speed whether you use it to build a future or whether you use it to scroll past other people's futures on a screen. The hour is going to disappear either way. The only question is what you get to keep from it. Will you keep a sharper mind, a new skill, a stronger habit? Or will you keep nothing but the memory of having been entertained for 60 minutes that will never return to you? Let's talk about discipline for a moment, because discipline is the bridge between the philosophy I am describing and the results you actually want in your life. Discipline is not punishment. Discipline is not deprivation for its own sake. Discipline is simply choosing what you want most over what you want right now. That's it. That is the entire definition. Every person you admire, every person whose life looks like something you would want to trade places with, made that choice again and again, in 1,000 small, unremarkable moments that nobody else was watching. They chose the book over the noise. They chose the workout over the extra hour of sleep. They chose the difficult conversation over the comfortable silence. They chose to show up prepared when showing up unprepared would have been so much easier. None of those individual choices looked dramatic, but stacked over years, they built an entirely different human being than the one who kept choosing comfort. Here is something I have come to believe deeply, and I want you to write it down if you can. Do not wish it were easier. Wish you were better. Do not wish for fewer problems. Wish for more skills. Do not wish for a lighter load. Wish for a stronger back. This is the posture of everyone who has ever built something worth having. They stopped asking life to be gentler with them, and they started asking themselves to be greater than what life demanded. This shift alone, the shift from wishing your circumstances would change to insisting that you will change, is worth more than every shortcut you have ever been sold. Let me tell you about value creation, because this is where philosophy turns into practical income, into practical opportunity, into practical freedom. Every dollar that has ever changed hands in the history of commerce has changed hands because someone provided value to someone else. Not worked hard, provided value. You can work incredibly hard doing something nobody needs, and you will remain poor doing it with great intensity. Or you can work moderately, doing something a great number of people desperately need, and you will prosper doing it with far less strain. The marketplace does not reward effort, it rewards value. So the question that should occupy your mind every single day is not how can I work harder, but how can I become more valuable? How can I solve a bigger problem? How can I serve more people, more deeply, with more skill than I currently possess? If you can multiply your value by 3, you can multiply your income by 3. If you can multiply your value by 5, you can multiply your income by 5, and often far beyond it, because value compounds in ways that simple math cannot capture. A person who is 5 times more skilled does not simply get paid 5 times more. They get access to rooms, relationships, and opportunities that a less skilled version of themselves would never have been invited into. Skill opens doors that money alone cannot open. So if you want more, and there is nothing wrong with wanting more, the path is not to squeeze more hours out of your current level of value. The path is to raise the level of value itself. Let's talk about habits, because habits are the machinery through which all of this philosophy becomes real in your actual daily life. You do not rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your habits. Read that once more, slowly. You do not rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your habits. You can set the most magnificent, ambitious, inspiring goal of your entire life, but if your habits remain small, undisciplined, and reactive, you will eventually drift back down to whatever your habits can sustain. This is why the wealthy stay wealthy across setbacks, and this is why lottery winners so often return to poverty within a few short years. The habits never changed, so the person never changed, and the money, without a person capable of sustaining it, simply evaporates back into the shape of who they had always been. So build the habits before you demand the results. Read daily, even if it is only 10 pages. Reflect daily, even if it is only 5 honest minutes with yourself at the end of the day. Plan tomorrow before tonight ends so you wake up with direction instead of drift. Seek out people who are further ahead than you and study how they think, not just how they act. Say no to the noise that promises comfort and yes to the discomfort that promises growth. None of these habits are complicated. None of them require money you do not have or permission you have not been given. What they require is decision. A decision, repeated daily, to become someone new. I want to address something that keeps so many capable people stuck, and that is the fear of starting late, or the fear of not being talented enough. Let me be very direct with you. Talent is overrated, and timing is far more forgiving than your fear wants you to believe. What separates the person who transforms their life from the person who stays exactly where they are is rarely talent. It is almost always consistency applied over time to a clearly chosen direction. The tortoise did not win the race because it was faster. It won because it never stopped moving while the hare grew comfortable. Your comfort is the single greatest threat to the life you say you want. Not your competitors, not the economy, not your circumstances. Your comfort. Now let's zoom out. Because personal development divorced from vision becomes aimless activity, and I do not want to leave you with aimless activity. I want to leave you with direction. What is the point of becoming more valuable if you have no idea what you are becoming valuable for? So ask yourself, and ask yourself honestly, what does the next chapter of your life actually need to look like? Not what your parents wanted for you, not what your neighbors would be impressed by. What do you, in the quiet, honest core of yourself, actually want to build, become, and leave behind? Vision is the fuel that makes discipline sustainable, because discipline without a reason eventually runs dry. But discipline, in service of a vision you deeply believe in, becomes almost effortless, because you are no longer forcing yourself to do hard things. You are simply becoming the person your future requires you to be. Think about legacy for a moment, because legacy is simply value that outlives you. It is not reserved for the famous or the wealthy. A parent who raises a child with wisdom and character leaves a legacy. A mentor who shapes one young mind leaves a legacy. A worker who does honest, excellent work leaves a legacy of reputation that opens doors for their children long after they are gone. You are building a legacy right now, today, in this very hour, whether you intend to or not, through every habit you keep and every excuse you accept. So build one on purpose. Do not let it be an accident of neglect. Let it be a masterpiece of intention. Let me bring all of this back together because I promised you a philosophy, not just a speech. And philosophy only matters if it changes what you do the moment this ends. Stop pursuing success as though it were a fixed prize sitting on a shelf somewhere out ahead of you, waiting to be caught if you simply run fast enough. Start becoming the kind of person success naturally moves toward. Work on your job, yes, because it feeds your family today. But work harder on yourself, because it feeds every single day of the rest of your life. Multiply your value, and watch your income, your influence, and your options multiply alongside it. Build the small disciplines nobody applauds, because they are the very foundation of the life everybody eventually envies. And build all of it in service of a vision that is genuinely yours, so that the effort feels less like sacrifice and more like becoming. Let me tell you a story, and it is a story that repeats itself in some form in nearly every town, every city, every country on this earth. There were once two young men who started working at the very same warehouse, in the very same month. They loaded the same trucks, took the same lunch breaks, earned the same modest wage, and complained, on occasion, about the same tired feet at the end of a long shift. One of them, when the whistle blew at the end of the day, went home, ate dinner, and fell asleep in front of the television, and there is no shame in rest. Rest is necessary, but rest became the entire remainder of his life outside of work. The other young man, when the whistle blew, went home, ate the same simple dinner, and then opened a single book on business and human behavior for 30 minutes before bed. Just 30 minutes. Nothing dramatic. No one applauded him. No one even noticed. He did this most nights, not every night, because he was human, and some nights he was simply too tired, but most nights, for about 2 years. At the end of those 2 years, he did not have a diploma to show for it. He did not have a certificate on his wall. What he had was a mind that had been quietly reshaped, an understanding of how businesses actually operate, how customers actually think, how leaders actually communicate, and how problems are actually solved rather than merely endured. When a supervisor position opened up, it was not given to the man who had shown up longest. It was given to the man who could speak with clarity about how to fix what was broken. Same warehouse, same wage, same starting point. But one man had been investing in a version of himself that did not yet exist. And when the opportunity finally arrived, that version of himself was ready to receive it. This is the story of personal development. It rarely announces itself in the moment it is happening. It only announces itself later, when opportunity knocks and you discover, almost to your own surprise, that you have already become the person capable of answering that door. I want to talk now about the difference between activity and productivity, because this distinction alone could change the trajectory of your entire year. Busy is not the same as valuable. A person can be in motion from sunrise to sunset and still be creating almost nothing of lasting worth, simply because motion was never the goal. Value was always the goal, and value requires direction. Ask yourself honestly, at the end of most days, could you clearly name the one thing you did that moved your life forward? Or did the day simply happen to you? One notification, one distraction, one small fire to put out at a time, until you collapsed into bed having been extraordinarily busy and extraordinarily unchanged. Personal development demands that you stop measuring your day by how tired you feel and start measuring it by how much closer you are to the person you are trying to become. Exhaustion is not evidence of progress. It never has been. A person can exhaust themselves running in circles just as easily as they can exhaust themselves running towards something. The circles will always feel busier because there is no destination to measure against. Only motion for the sake of motion. Let's talk honestly about excuses, because excuses are the quiet killers of every unlived potential on this earth. I do not have the time. I did not get the right education. I do not know the right people. I started too late. I was not born into the right family. Every single one of these excuses contains a grain of truth, and I will not insult you by pretending otherwise. Life is not equally distributed in its starting conditions. But here is what I have observed across every field of endeavor, in every era, in every country. There has never been a shortage of people who started with less than you and still built more than most people ever will. There has never been a shortage of people who began later than you and still arrived further than most people ever do. The excuse may be true, and it may still be irrelevant, because the marketplace and life itself does not ask where you started. It only asks what you did with what you had. So let me ask you plainly, what excuse have you been quietly protecting, nursing, and defending? And what would happen if, starting today, you simply set it down and picked up a plan instead? I want to spend some time now on the subject of associations, because who you spend your time with will shape who you become almost as powerfully as what you read or what habits you build. You are, in a very real sense, the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. Not because you consciously copy them, but because influence is quiet, gradual, and almost impossible to resist over time. If the people around you complain constantly, you will find complaining creeping into your own vocabulary. If the people around you dream constantly, plan constantly, build constantly, you will find yourself pulled upward by the simple gravity of proximity. This does not mean you abandon people who are struggling. Compassion still matters. Loyalty still matters. But it does mean you must be deliberate about who has permission to speak into your ambitions and who you allow to shrink your sense of what is possible. Seek out at least a few people who are further along than you in the areas that matter most to you, and study them, not with envy, but with attention. What do they read? How do they speak about setbacks? How do they structure their mornings? You are not trying to copy their life. You are trying to extract the principles beneath their results and apply those principles to the life only you can build. Let's talk about failure, because no honest conversation about success can avoid it. And frankly, I would distrust anyone who tried to sell you a version of success with the failure edited out. Failure is not the opposite of success. Failure is the tuition you pay on the way to success. Every skill you now consider yourself competent in, you were once terrible at. Every relationship you now consider strong, likely survived a season of friction that could have ended it. Every business that now looks inevitable in hindsight was, at some early point, one bad month away from closing its doors. The difference between the people who eventually succeed and the people who quietly give up is rarely the absence of failure. It is almost always the presence of a different relationship to failure. The person who keeps growing treats failure as information. What did this attempt teach me that I did not know before? The person who stays stuck treats failure as identity. This happened. Therefore, I am someone to whom bad things happen. Therefore, I should protect myself by attempting less. Do you see the trap in that second sentence? By attempting less, you do not eliminate failure. You simply guarantee a smaller, safer, and far less interesting kind of failure. The failure of a life that was never fully lived, which in my judgment is the most expensive failure of all, because at least the failure of a bold attempt teaches you something you can use tomorrow. Now I want to address money directly, because I know some of you listening are here specifically for that. And there is nothing wrong with wanting more money, as long as you understand what money actually is. Money is not the reward for hours spent. Money is the reward for problems solved and value delivered. This is why 2 people can work the exact same number of hours and end the year with wildly different incomes, because one of them spent those hours solving small, easily replaceable problems, and the other spent those hours solving problems that were rare, difficult, and deeply needed. If you want to increase your income without simply working more hours, and eventually you must stop trying to solve it with more hours, because hours are the one resource you cannot manufacture more of, then you must increase the difficulty and the value of the problems you are capable of solving. This is what personal development actually produces at the practical level. It is not motivation for its own sake. It is the steady expansion of your capacity to solve harder problems for more people, which the marketplace will reward with a precision that rarely feels fair in the short term, but almost always proves fair over the long run. I want to spend a few minutes on the subject of patience, because personal development is a philosophy that rewards those who can play a longer game than the people around them are willing to play. We live in a culture addicted to speed, addicted to the idea that transformation should be visible within weeks, that discipline should produce dramatic results within a month, that if the changes are not obvious quickly, the effort must not be working. This is one of the most damaging lies of our time. Real transformation, the kind that survives setbacks and outlives trends, moves slowly, almost invisibly, in the early stages. The first 6 months of a new discipline often look like almost nothing has changed. This is precisely the season in which most people quit, right at the exact moment the compounding is beginning to gather quiet momentum beneath the surface. Do not judge a year by its first month. Do not judge a discipline by its first quarter. The person who keeps going after the excitement has worn off, after the applause has stopped, after the results still are not visible yet. That is the person who eventually outpaces everyone who needed instant proof before they were willing to continue believing. Let's talk about identity, because ultimately, personal development is not about doing more things. It is about becoming a different kind of person. And once you become a different kind of person, the doing follows almost automatically. This is a subtle but critical distinction. If you try to force new habits onto an unchanged identity, you will feel like you are constantly fighting yourself, because on some level, you still believe you are the kind of person who sleeps in, who procrastinates, who avoids hard conversations, who spends more than they save. But if you shift the identity first, if you begin to genuinely see yourself as someone who is disciplined, who is growing, who is becoming valuable, the habits that support that identity stop feeling like a burden and start feeling like simple confirmation of who you already are. So do not just ask, what should I do differently this year? Ask, who do I need to become this year, so that these actions are no longer a struggle, but simply an expression of my new identity. There is a particular kind of quiet courage required for all of this, and I want to name it plainly because I think it deserves to be named. It takes courage to work on yourself when nobody around you is doing the same. It takes courage to read while others scroll, to plan while others complain, to rise early while others sleep in, to save while others spend, to have the difficult conversation while others avoid it, especially when doing these things sets you apart, even mildly, from the people you love and grew up around. Some of them may not understand what you are doing. Some may even feel, without meaning to, a little threatened by your growth, because your growth quietly asks a question of their own choices that they may not be ready to answer. I am not telling you this to make you fearful. I am telling you this so that when you feel that friction, you recognize it for what it is, evidence that you are actually changing, and not evidence that you are doing something wrong. Let me return before I close to the idea of attraction, because I want to leave you with the fullest possible picture of what that word actually means in this philosophy. To attract success is not to sit back passively and wait for it to notice you. Attraction, in nature, in business, in relationships, is always the result of an enormous, often invisible, amount of internal development. The flower does not attract the bee by accident. It attracts the bee because of a long, quiet, biological process of becoming exactly what a bee cannot resist. That process is not glamorous. It is not visible from a distance. It is happening underground, in the soil, in the roots, long before anyone ever sees the bloom above the surface. Your personal development is your root system. Nobody applauds roots. Nobody photographs roots. But without roots, there is no bloom. And without a bloom, there is nothing for the world to be drawn toward. So while you are in that unglamorous season, reading the book nobody sees, waking up the extra 30 minutes nobody applauds, having the hard conversation nobody witnesses, understand that you are not wasting your time. You are building the very thing that will one day make you impossible to overlook. I want to talk about the way you speak to yourself, because I have come to believe that the conversation happening inside your own head, the one nobody else can hear, is quietly shaping your future more than any external circumstance ever could. Pay attention, just for one day, to the tone you use with yourself when you make a mistake. Is it the tone of a harsh, impatient critic who has already decided you are incapable? Or is it the tone of a wise, demanding, but ultimately supportive mentor who expects more from you, precisely because they believe you are capable of more? These are two entirely different internal environments, and you cannot grow a strong, resilient, valuable version of yourself inside a hostile internal environment any more than you could grow a healthy plant in poisoned soil. This does not mean lowering your standards. If anything, the mentor voice holds a higher standard than the critic voice, because the critic voice secretly expects you to fail and simply confirms it, while the mentor voice expects you to rise and pushes you toward it. Listen to how you talk to yourself this week. If you would not say it to someone you are trying to develop into greatness, stop saying it to yourself. Let's talk about sacrifice, because I do not want to leave you with the illusion that any of this is free. Every single thing you decide to become requires you to say no to something else, and there is no way around that trade. If you decide to read for an hour each night, you are saying no to an hour of something else, perhaps entertainment, perhaps rest, perhaps simply nothing at all. If you decide to wake up earlier, you are saying no to an hour of sleep you might have otherwise kept. If you decide to save a portion of every dollar you earn, you are saying no to the immediate comfort that spending it would have provided. None of this is a secret formula that avoids sacrifice. It simply asks you to choose your sacrifice deliberately instead of having it chosen for you by. drift, and distraction. Here is the encouraging part of this truth. You are already sacrificing something, right now, in this very season of your life. Nobody escapes sacrifice. The only question that matters is whether you are sacrificing your future for your comfort or sacrificing a little comfort for your future. Both are sacrifices. Only one of them compounds in your favor. I want to speak now about the difference between wishing and deciding, because this distinction has quietly separated the people who transform their lives from the people who simply talk about transforming their lives for decades without ever actually doing it. Wishing is passive. Wishing says, I hope things get better. I hope I find more time. I hope this year is different. Wishing places the responsibility for change somewhere outside of you, in luck, in timing, in circumstance. Deciding is active. Deciding says, I will read 20 pages tonight regardless of how tired I am. I will have that conversation this week regardless of how uncomfortable it feels. I will set aside this specific amount of money before I allow myself to spend on anything else. A decision has edges. It has a specific action attached to a specific moment. A wish floats. A decision lands. If you find yourself constantly wishing for a better year, a better body, a better income, a better relationship, stop wishing for one more week and instead sit down and convert that wish into a decision with an actual date, an actual action, and an actual measure of whether you kept it. Let me talk to you about the value of teaching what you learn, because this is one of the most underused accelerants of personal development that exist. When you learn something new, whether it is a skill, a principle, or a hard lesson from a mistake, and you take the time to explain it to someone else, whether that is a coworker, a friend, a child, or even an audience online, something remarkable happens inside your own understanding. Teaching forces clarity. You cannot teach what you only vaguely understand, so the act of preparing to explain something to another person will expose the gaps in your own knowledge faster than almost any other method available to you. This is why the fastest way to master something is often to commit, even before you feel fully ready, to sharing it with someone else. You do not need to wait until you are an expert to begin teaching. You only need to be one useful step ahead of the person you are teaching. Along the way, you will discover that teaching does something else entirely unexpected. It makes the knowledge stick. What you teach, you rarely forget, because you have had to organize it, simplify it, and hand it to someone else in a form that actually makes sense. I want to address the subject of gratitude because I know some listeners might assume that a philosophy built around ambition and growth has no room for gratitude, and I want to correct that assumption directly. Gratitude and ambition are not opposites. They are partners. Gratitude without ambition can slide into complacency, a quiet acceptance of less than what is possible simply because what already exists feels sufficient. But ambition without gratitude becomes a joyless, exhausting treadmill, always chasing the next milestone without ever pausing to notice that the last milestone was, in fact, reached. The healthiest posture, and the one I want to leave with you, is to be deeply grateful for exactly where you are standing today, while simultaneously refusing to believe that this is the furthest you are capable of going. Gratitude anchors you so that ambition does not destroy your peace. Ambition lifts you so that gratitude does not calcify into stagnation. Hold both at the same time in the same hand, and you will find a kind of sustainable drive that burns for decades instead of the kind that flames brightly for a single year before it burns you out entirely. Now let's talk about consistency versus intensity, because this is a trap that catches ambitious people more often than it catches lazy people, which might surprise you. The ambitious person often believes that if a little effort is good, an enormous burst of effort must be even better. And so they throw themselves into an extreme new routine, exercising for 2 hours a day, reading 3 books a week, working 18-hour days, all at once, all starting on the same Monday. And for about 2 weeks, this works beautifully, fueled by motivation and the thrill of a fresh start. Then, almost inevitably, the body or the schedule or the will simply cannot sustain that intensity, and the entire effort collapses under its own weight, often taking the person's confidence down with it, because now they have evidence in their own mind that they tried and failed. Compare this to the person who commits to something far smaller but far more sustainable. 20 minutes of reading, 20 minutes of exercise, One meaningful task completed with excellence each day and simply refuses to miss it. Even on the hard days, even on the tired days, even on the days when the intense version of themselves would have skipped entirely. A year later, the second person has an unbroken record of nearly 400 small sessions behind them. The first person has a distant memory of 2 impressive weeks followed by 11 months of nothing. Consistency beats intensity nearly every single time, because consistency is the only strategy that can survive contact with an ordinary, imperfect human life. I want to talk about the stories you tell about your own past, because the way you narrate what has already happened to you shapes what you believe is possible for what has not happened yet. 2 people can experience the exact same difficult childhood, the exact same painful setback, the exact same unfair circumstance, and walk away with entirely opposite conclusions. One person tells the story as proof that life is against them, that people like them do not get to succeed, that the deck was stacked from the very beginning. The other person tells the exact same set of facts as the origin story of their resilience, the reason they learned to work harder, think sharper, and want more deeply than someone who was simply handed an easier path. The facts did not change between these 2 people. Only the story did. And the story you tell about your past becomes, whether you intend it to or not, the script you are unconsciously following for your future. So I want to ask you, gently but directly, what story have you been telling about the hardest chapters of your life? Is it a story that traps you, or a story that has quietly been building the very strength you will need for what comes next? Let's talk, before I close, about the long view, because personal development is ultimately a philosophy of decades, not days. It is tempting in a single motivational video like this one to promise you that everything will be different by next month, and I could tell you that, and it would feel good in this moment, but it would not be honest. And I respect you too much to be dishonest with you. The truth is slower and, I believe, far more beautiful than a quick transformation could ever be. The truth is that if you commit to working on yourself, quietly, consistently, without needing applause or instant proof, for the next 5 years, you will very likely become someone that the person listening to this video right now cannot even fully imagine. Not because the changes will be dramatic in any single month, but because 5 years is nearly 1,800 days, and 1,800 days of small, compounding deposits into your own skill, your own discipline, your own character, produces a return that no single burst of motivation could ever match. Play the long game. Let other people chase quick fixes and instant results. You are building something that is meant to last. I want to talk briefly about the morning, because how you begin your day quietly sets the tone for how you show up in every hour that follows. The first hour after you wake is rarely neutral. It is either an hour that strengthens you through intention, movement, learning, or planning, or it is an hour that drains you before the day has even properly started, through reaching immediately for a screen filled with other people's opinions, other people's outrage, other people's highlight reels. You do not have to become a rigid 5 a.m. disciple to benefit from this principle. You simply have to protect the first meaningful stretch of your day from becoming reactive. Give your mind something intentional before you give the world permission to hand you its agenda. Even 15 minutes of quiet, focused intention before the noise begins can change the entire posture with which you meet everything that follows. I want to close this thought with something about legacy and time that I think about often. None of us know exactly how many years we have been given, and there is a strange mercy in that uncertainty, because it protects us from either despair or complacency. But here is what I do know. The version of you that exists 5 years from now is being built quietly, decision by decision, starting today. That version either resembles the person you are right now, only slightly more tired and slightly more settled into old patterns, or it resembles someone almost unrecognizable, sharper, calmer, more capable, more valuable, more at peace with themselves, because of what was built in the small, unremarkable hours nobody else was watching. You get to choose which of those 2 people you are building, not with one dramatic decision, but with the accumulation of 1,000 small ones, starting with the very next choice you make after this video ends. So here is what I want you to do the moment this video ends, and I mean the very moment. Do not wait for tomorrow. Do not wait for Monday. Do not wait for a better mood or a cleaner slate. Pick one single area of your life where you have been coasting and decide right now that you will begin working on yourself in that area today. Open the book you have been meaning to read. Write down the goal you have been avoiding naming out loud. Have the conversation you have been postponing. Wake up 30 minutes earlier tomorrow and give that time to your growth instead of your sleep. Small as it may seem, that single decision, made today, is the first flower blooming in a field that will one day be so rich, so vivid, and so undeniable that success will have no choice but to come looking for you. Go become the person worth attracting. The rest, I promise you, will follow.